I'm like Bobby in that I use an iPad, so my testimony is going to be extra awesome. Just kidding. Well, my name is Derek, and if many of you haven't seen me around in the past years, because I've been away for quite a while, but I've been going to this church, I guess, or I started going to this church maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. But first I just want to thank God, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, this church, and in particular a few people, Bobby, Robert Malone, my wife Kristen, Joe Nenny, and many others. It's going to go on. Revelations 12:11 says that they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony. I know we all have stories, and our stories all have power and encouragement to help us overcome all obstacles. And my hope really is that my story will be a testament to God's power, Christ's love, and the Holy Spirit's entire work, as well as a testimony of this church and what you people have done that make a real impact. My adult life has seen me get a bachelor's degree, an MBA. I'm pursuing a second master's degree. I've had several great jobs. I've traveled the world. I played 4 varsity sports in high school, 2 varsity sports in college. And I'm a pretty successful person, I guess, on those grounds. If you've known me the last couple of years, you probably think of running as my identity. I've run 15 marathons, 3 of them at Boston, 7 50-kilometer races, 1 50-mile race, amongst other things. So you can say I'm a little crazy, maybe. I grew up in a family up in Portland, Oregon. My mom and my grandmother were both ardent Baptists. My dad had a drinking problem, but finally accepted Christ later in his life. Basically, I did everything I could to stay away from the church until I accepted Christ at the age of 16. If you were to ask me or friends about who I am and some of the things that I struggle with, I'm extremely independent, I'm very stubborn. I need to be the center of attention, usually to make people laugh or try to have funny comments. I'm very self-critical. I internalize my feelings. I live with huge regrets. And while I can make many tough decisions, especially in business or other areas of my life, I have not done that when it comes to closest relationships, where it's caused me so much pain and frustration and anger. I would say that my identity or who I thought I was could be wrapped up in my long-distance running or what I could offer someone on the outside or the cool things that are happening in my job. So hopefully that will give you just a little bit of a background of who I am up to today. If you look back 1 year ago, literally almost 1 year ago, my wife and I were celebrating our first anniversary. If you looked at us, you kind of looked like a cute couple. She's really short, I'm really tall. And, I wrap my arms around her and you can't see her. I was working at the energy bar company in Cliff Bar. I was doing tax accounting there. And it was joy in a very different life because I used to work in public accounting, and as Craig and others can tell you, you work 60, 80-hour weeks, and I was actually working only 40 hours a week for the first time in many, many years. I was dealing with some physical injuries, but I was still training for some marathons. If you look into October, I ran 2 marathons. I ran the Portland Marathon, and then the next week I ran the Nike Women's Marathon. I know I'm not a woman, but I still ran it anyway. I got a nice Tiffany necklace too, which is sticking with the whole Bobby thing of, 2 guys in the Bay Area thing, whatever. My running was a huge part of my life, and it was a big part of how I processed things in terms of my stress, in terms of my job. But shortly after that, I had to shut myself down from running because my Achilles tendon was in so much pain. And so basically I stopped running. And I still had a lot of other things going for me at the time, but if you knew me, it was a huge blow. But if you looked on the inside, I was really building nothing on the inside from truth. Everything was complacent, everything was a facade, a lie. My relationship with my wife, well, it looked good on the outside. I was growing complacent. I had no relationship with God. I really only came to this church because Kristen came to this church. It culminated in November when on a Friday evening I just lashed out at Kristen, and I had so many things that I had kept inside that harbored so much resentment, so much bitterness. I just lashed out. I saw people at this church have so much joy and so much excitement, regardless of their circumstance, and yet I couldn't feel any joy. I kind of tired of living in this community in West Oakland. I didn't really feel belonged in this church. I had this really weird perception that people actually wanted me to be away from them. I don't know what it was, but I didn't feel I didn't belong in this church. But I continued to seek approval from everyone on the outside, and I was the ultimate people pleaser. So if I perceived something was wrong with how you viewed me, I would do whatever I could to change that. And as you can imagine, if you live in that kind of situation, it's very stressful and it's very constant. Hebrews 12:15 says, "See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many may be defiled." And I let bitterness defile me and fundamentally change me. I harbored so much regret and bitterness for not being sure of what I wanted in life. I wasn't sure I had married Kristen for the right motives. I constantly wondered who else would be out there for me. I used pornography as a fantasy to get away from things. I lusted after women frequently. I felt obligated overwhelmingly in terms of helping other people. My relationship with God, as I said, is non-existent. I knew in my head the gospel, but I didn't know in my heart, my spirit, or my soul. And I think worse off, though, is I justified everything that I did, no matter what the consequences could be. In December, I asked Kristen to go away. And she used to stay with her parents for several weeks, and I tried to figure out what I was doing. And I prepared divorce papers. I was pretty convinced that she and I were not going to stay married. I mean, again, we're only a year and a half into our marriage, and that was what I was thinking. I ended up going apartment searching, and I at least had an apartment on my own, so that my new bank accounts. Basically, it was tearing apart the things that she and I jointly owned together. Early in the new year, I used alcohol and pornography constantly to keep me in a fantasy world. Every day I go home from work and I drink. Every day I come home from work and I look at porn. In February, at the urging of my therapist, Kristen, and others, I met with a psychiatrist who was prescribed depression medications, and this is where things really started to go downhill. Because the depression medication had a constant negative effect, or an immediate negative effect on me that was constant, to the point where even sometimes I blacked out. So, of course, when you believe the lies that I believed, I kind of thought, oh, there's a thrill in taking this medication and mixing it with alcohol. And so I was meant to take 1 pill a day, but I started taking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pills in a day. One time I drove to Kristen's, I had taken 5 pills, and then in the morning came over to Kristen's, took 5 more, and she freaked out. And we were on the phone with Kaiser nurses that evening, just trying to tell them I was okay. One Saturday night, actually, in February, I was so amped up that I drank 2 entire bottles of scotch and took several pills, and the result was that I don't remember anything that evening. And this is kind of funny, actually, but I'm addicted to gum, basically. I just chew gum constantly. And I woke up with several packs of chewed gum all over my body, my clothes, my hair, my bed. And I looked at my phone log, and I had called 3 or 4 friends over 20 times that night, left voicemails. Some of them played my messages back to me, and I was like, oh, wow, this is bad. I guess, thank God, nothing worse happened, but I mean, you think that blacking out and having gum all over you would help deter you from drinking, but I couldn't break the depression that I was in and continued to spiral out of control. I mean, to kind of help understand the despair and the hopelessness I faced, I mean, imagine yourself in a room that is so short you can't stand up in, and it's not wide enough that you can't lay down fully in. I mean, you think it's claustrophobia right there. You just try to think that thought, and that's kind of how I viewed my life at that moment. By February and early March, I was drinking so much that I got at least tipsy every night, if not more. And even visiting Kristen at times, when she allowed me to come over, I would go off into the kitchen while she was in the living room, and I would just down bottles of wine like it was water, just to feel something. every time I did that, I ended up, like, in my heart trying to cry out to God and asking for something real. And, you know, looking back, I realized that I wanted Him to give me things on my own terms. And so that continued to get me to become enraged and desperate. That one night, I decided to drink a few glasses of scotch, have a few depression medication pills, and take a knife and cut my wrist. It was just this top scar on my wrist, on my hand or arm, and it hurt, but it was something real. The skin on your arm is pretty tough, so I decided to cut again because I wanted to see what would happen. I flirted with trying to understand what it was doing, and it gave me a thrill of, well, this is not really doing what they do in the movies where you cut, you die. So I was like, well, I'll try it again. The next day I tried again, and the next day I tried again, and there's multiple scars there. So it was more just a flirt with the idea of what would happen if I continued to cut. But then at the end of this 1 week, it actually tried to bleed myself to death. And there are 2 scars that are quite deep. But interestingly enough, and very miraculously, while I was doing it, I was crying out to God, like, to help me and save me, or give me something, and yet I was crying in such agony that He actually made me go to sleep, and nothing more happened. My last attempt happened in front of Kristen, and as you can imagine, she was horrified and shocked, and her outburst was so powerful that it literally shook my very being. And yet I knew her outburst was of her, from her, but I felt the Holy Spirit powerfully saying to me, Derek, you have to stop. And that was the last time that I tried to kill myself. The change started to happen at several points during March, April, and May, and there were many small moments. I know many of you were praying for me, sending me text messages. I still actually have all the text messages people sent me. And in March and April, I started to live with Kristen again, and I knew there was much healing needed to be done there, but obviously she never held back her feelings. I mean, she would get upset, and she would just lay into me. But she also showed me so much love and compassion, and she encouraged me to continue to put my Christian friends back in my life, and she ultimately forgave me for all that happened. I started hanging out with people like Joe and Brian and Robert a little bit more, and they would just encourage me, but they never pushed me, and it was just a great, amazing testament to them, knowing that they were encouraging me and praying for me, but I still needed to change. But I think one event that epitomizes what this church is about and the vision of us in this community is a prayer session that happened on a Sunday afternoon. 15 to 20 people showed up. There's one chair in the middle of this room. And basically people laid hands on me and prayed for me for an hour. You know, if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. And that's all I kept thinking about. The moment was powerful and very scary because I didn't really know what to think. I was just thinking I was going to be judged harshly, and yet there was much thoughtfulness and so much grace given in that moment. People laid hands on me, and I just I could feel urgency and love, forgiveness, compassion, accountability. But I think for me, the most important thing I felt was authenticity. The Spirit works. For those who were there might remember, but we were in the middle of the prayer, and Melanie just cried out and wailed and wept to God. And it was the most powerful moment I've ever experienced in prayer. And if you've read the book of The Lord of the Rings, or you've seen the second movie of The Lord of the Rings, there's a scene in it where the wizard Gandalf is trying to remove the wizard Saruman from the king, Theoden of Gondor, and Gandalf goes, I release you, and nothing happens. And Theoden starts laughing at him, ha 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 ha, you have no power here. And Gandalf tries again, and yet there's a struggle, and Saruman says, if you kill him, if you kill me, you kill him. And Gandalf says, no, you will not kill me, you will not kill him. And there's a continued struggle, and there's this laughter and just this animosity, and then there's that struggle that culminates in the moment of Gandalf raises the staff, gestures out, and then boom, Saruman's gone and he's fleeted. And you can see like 50 years coming off the guy's face, and you can feel just the weight coming off. And in this moment of prayer, Melanie is weeping and wailing, and people are saying the same thing, and I'm just going like, ha 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 ha, you have no power here, believing what Satan was telling me. And yet there was continued prayer and urgency. And then I was like, wait, maybe there is something there, but it was chilling because it was like this truth was there. And then it happened. The cloak was lifted. God presented me 3 visions. One was a strong arm coming around you. Like think of a really big, tall, like lineman from a football with the smallest person in your arm. That's kind of what I thought of. Or to have this vision of angels just swirling around me with these huge shields, huge swords. It was like, you're not going to get them. And then at this time this was happening, the Japanese earthquake was still a pretty big deal, and I could just think of in my head this vision of this huge rock, like, stories tall, and the tsunami waves crashing up against the rock, but nothing could eclipse this rock, and I was on top of it. Those are the visions God gave me, and I was just overwhelmed that this started the change in me, and the Spirit was working, and it was a culmination of so many hours and so many prayers from this church family and friends. But there still was more to do. Although the change was slowly happening, I had the effect of all of this on my job. My job at Cliff Bar was great. We had great benefits. We had so many, I boasted about it every day. And yet my work performance was suffering. I was asked by my boss to change some things, and I thought I made the change. I took Chris to the airport on Saturday to go with her family to Italy, and 2 days later, I was fired. And so she's in Italy, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I have 2 weeks before she comes back, and I'm out of the blue fired. And so as you can think of it, we pretty much lost almost everything. And yet God did a miraculous thing. He took those 2 weeks, and He gave me this peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. And it was actually something I think Bobby said he talked about a passage that says, rejoice in the Lord, and He will give you peace that surpasses all understanding. And I think the key that we miss is that we rejoice in the Lord first. And I'm like, well, I'm not supposed to thank you and rejoice with you. I have nothing now. But all I kept thinking about, and the Holy Spirit put on my heart, was, I've given you everything. I actually believed it, and it was so powerful to me, and I just felt so at peace. I mean, there's still moments I'm like, okay, God, I need a job. I need to do something, but God's provided in so many ways. This last year has been something of a journey, and I needed all of these things to understand that ultimately God wanted me. He wanted a relationship with me. While the process of forgiveness and healing is still going on, what became apparent to me is the relationship between forgiveness and love. I was bitter because I never realized how much I was loved, and therefore how much I was forgiven. Bobby talked about it last week, or maybe before. It was the Luke 7:47. For this reason I say to you, her sins, which were many, have been forgiven, for she loved much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. My hope is that you guys would see this change in me, but that I would also continue to experience the realization that I have been forgiven much, and in that I will take that forgiveness and love much in return. I'm still learning and growing, but the joy is that victory is already assured. We already have victory. I am the son of the living God, and He gives me living water. I know Jesus said that, take the living water and you will thirst no more. I was like, well, He's full of crap, because I just want more of it. But I I say that I thirst even more because I want more of it. God brought me here, and it is by His will that I'm in this place, and that I went through everything. And He will keep me here because of His love and His grace. He made this trial a blessing, and He taught me lessons that He intends for me to continue to learn, and it's a continuing to learn and receiving grace that comforts me. God used this church and my friends in this church to pray for me, encourage me, and be an example of Christ's love. This church is like many that Paul writes about in the New Testament. And the ministries we have at this church play a huge role. But I think the most important ministry is the ministry of just the fact that we should love each other. I'm particularly moved by 1 Peter 1, 6 through 9, when it says, "In this you greatly rejoice, that even though now, for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And though you have not seen Him, you love Him. And though you do not see Him now, but believe in Him, you greatly rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, obtaining as the outcome of your faith the salvation of your souls." So my life is now an open book, and I'm just again thankful for this church and everything that's happened. And if you ever have a need need encouragement or just want someone to listen, hopefully I can be that someone, or maybe you'll find someone in this church that can help you. But again, I just want to thank you guys for everything you've done. You've meant a lot to me, and ultimately praise goes to Jesus Christ.